Hey everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Hope you are doing well in your neck of the woods. Before we get going with tonight's show, I'd like you to just chime in and let me know where you're tuning in from in the world. Say hello, give me a like or a thumbs up, and make sure if you've got family members or friends that could benefit from this information, go ahead and hit that share button or copy and paste this URL. Make sure you send it or fast forward it over to them. As always, our goal and our mission here is to help save 100 million lives. So greatly appreciate your help, you helping me as I help you, right? So tonight I want to talk a little bit about some things that are weighing a little heavy on my heart. You guys all know that, one of the biggest premises that any of you could have to improve your health is to get this one fundamental thing, right? Knowledge. Because knowledge equals power. If I've heard people say that ignorance, you've probably heard this saying, is bliss. Ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is being unempowered or being basically shackled, whereas knowledge equals power. And so many of you tune in on a regular basis to the show, and if you're new to the show, pay heed to what I'm about to say. Many of you tune into the show because you're after this right here. You're after this. Why? Because in your life you felt powerless because you've been going to mainstream doctors and you've been told kind of a scenario or a story that it's in your head. You're just getting older. Sometimes they even tell you that you're crazy, right? So, and this has led you to the point of feeling powerless because the only options that you have when you have doctors that are telling you these things is either to take the medications that they're prescribing and just chalk it up to failure and lack of ability because you just don't know what to do. And that's why you come here. And so because you're not crazy and it's not in your head, you seek out knowledge, right? And it's that knowledge that gives you the power. And it's that power, what does that do? Now you can make a change. And we're hoping that if you make a change, that you can have better outcomes in your health and better outcomes overall in your life. So I'd like to hear everybody's opinion. How many of you agree with that? So if you agree with that, just type in agree. So let's just start off with, if you don't agree with that, you're probably in the wrong place and you probably want to tune out or go away because many of you are not going to like what I'm going to be saying. So we seek knowledge to get the power because when we are told by others in our life that we're crazy, makes us feel powerless, and then we can't get to where we want, which is this change for better outcomes, right? So how many of you are after that? Again, type in agree if you agree with what I just said. If you don't, and tonight's show is going to be participation oriented. I'm really going to want you to participate. So when I ask questions, please chime in and let me know so I make sure that everybody's paying attention to what we're talking about tonight. So knowledge equals power. And again, power equals change. And that change hopefully will lead to a better outcome so that you can have an improved life. So all that being said, there's a lot going on in the world right now. And it's a kind of a crazy time. It's certainly an unprecedented time, in the sense that we've got what I would call a dichotomy going on. A dichotomy meaning a split. We've got some of you saying that you should stay at home, and we've got some of you saying that we should go to work. This is going to make sense in a minute. The ones that stay at home, the emphasis for staying at home is again, it's on, if we're talking about, let's just say the government wants you to do this, and a lot of owners, business owners, and I would say critical thinking individuals are wanting to do this. Because if we stay at home, we're isolated. There's food limitations, so our ability to be healthy by eating food is somewhat restricted. But beyond that, beyond that isolation, it's hard to exercise becomes harder to do. Some people are being arrested for going outside. So again, some people, and here where I'm at in Texas, we can go outside and we can walk, but I've seen a lot of news media cover that people getting arrested for being on the beach or people being arrested for sitting outside. And so we've got, again, going back to some of you may be over here, maybe saying, hey, look, we need to suspend the curve, right? Or the saying is flatten this curve. This is what we were originally told, is that we needed to flatten the curve. Why? Why were we told that? We were told that so that we could reduce hospital load and capacity, so that hospitals could continue to function and serve people, so that doctors and hospitals didn't have to make the decision whether or not somebody was going to live or die. And so that being said, the curve has been flattened. It definitely is flat at this point. Hospitals, we all know, are not overloaded. And we've heard that directly from a number of different doctors who actually work in many of these hospitals. So we know that this element has worked. So some would argue that the stay-at-home, the stay-at-home kind of quarantine, if you will, has flattened the curve. But the side effect of that is that it's also flattened the economy. And what I am worried about, and I'm worried about all of you, I'm worried about all of your health as you move forward. And again, this is not me saying that, either one of these sides is 100% right. This is me saying that I'm really concerned because in the long run, when you flatten out the economy, people go bankrupt, then suicide rates go up. And we know that this is the case in Tennessee. In one county of Tennessee, suicide rates are higher than the death toll for COVID-19 right now. So we know that suicide rates play a big role when people lose their businesses, lose their ability to earn a living, lose their livelihood. And it's not just the small businesses, but it's the employees that work for the small businesses. So when the economy goes bankrupt, then what generally tends to happen is people want the government to give them money or to bail them out. Now, we've seen a number of examples where this has happened, and whether you're, again, I'm not political. I don't want to be political. Please don't get political with me. If you want to get political, please go away. This isn't about politics. This is about life and death. This is about people being sick, but also people losing their capacity to earn an income and take care of their families. So it's a very much of a blend, and we should all be concerned about both sides. We can't all just stay at home in solid isolation and wait for the government to bail us out, because if we do that, we will be so economically bankrupt that you're going to see suicide rates, you're going to see alcoholism, you're going to see all kinds of other problems associated with the fall of the economy, and that's not going to be good either. And you're going to see probably more deaths than that. Now, let's just look at this from the perspective. And I know some of you are saying, well, look, the reason why there are so few deaths, there's about 40,000. This is a rough estimation, but about 40,000 deaths right now from COVID, and that's in the U.S. So we're talking about U.S. deaths. So at 40,000 deaths, if we really want to put that into perspective, and we look at how many people last year died from aspirin and opiate medications, you've got about 38,000 deaths from aspirin and opiates. Okay, now, there was no outrage over that 38,000 deaths. These were quiet deaths. They kind of got hushed under the rug. We also know that as an overall, in medicine, you had more than 100,000 deaths caused by, actually some estimates are like 300,000 deaths caused by proper use of medication. Where was the outrage? And again, this is in the U.S. So we're talking about one country's statistics. We're not talking about even globally. But so even right now, the number of medication-induced deaths in the United States alone is almost double the quantity of people that have died worldwide of COVID. So I think we have to look at this, and we have to quit saying that if we go back to work that people are going to die. I think we have to start looking at, if we don't figure out a way to get a good blend of this, people are going to die on both sides of the equation regardless. But a lot more people are going to die, and a lot more problems are going to come in the next 2 years as the economy goes bankrupt. And so going back to what we're talking about, knowledge is power to act. If we look at the way this thing has played out, let me draw you another diagram, because I think it's important for you to think about these things. I'm not telling you you're right or that you're wrong if you have a certain viewpoint or if you have a certain opinion, but I want you to think about these things intelligently so that if you're a critical thinker, that's knowledge. If you're just harping, what you read somewhere or you haven't really critically thought about this, then you're just espousing rhetoric. And rhetoric isn't going to help right now. And being on one side of politics or the other side of politics, this is a nonpartisan issue. This is a life or death issue for many people. You have to remember that, right? Here's what we know right now. Okay, we know that I think her name is Dr. Birx. She wants liberal counts. And this is, this isn't me making this up. This is directly out of her mouth. She said this last week. She wants liberal counts of COVID diagnosis and death rates. And she actually was last week on the podium and said, yes, we're counting this very liberally right now. And she's encouraging it. What this is doing, so what this is doing is it's leading to the potential for false statistics to be reported. And this is a problem. Because we're trying to base intelligent decisions. We're trying to be empowered to make good, intelligent decisions about opening our government or keeping our government closed so that more people don't die unnecessarily. But we're, in a large part, we're doing it, and I'm not saying all the statistics are false, but some of those statistics are definitely false. And this is coming out of her mouth, not mine. We also know that hospitals right now are being incentivized to call it COVID. So hospitals get $13,000 for a COVID patient, and they get $39,000 for a COVID death. So there's an incentivization, a government handout incentivization for hospitals to lie. And we've seen in the media and the news, a number of people have started to come out and speak about this, how yes, this is actually true, how hospitals are just calling it COVID, but not actually testing it for COVID. See, in medicine, there's a standard. And that standard is when somebody is sick, you have a standard of diagnosis, and that standard should be very, very clear. You also have a standard in terms of cause of death. There are standards for identifying cause of death, and those standards in some cases are being completely ignored. And so people that are dying from different causes of death that might not be COVID related are being called COVID deaths because the hospitals are incentivized to make $39,000. Now, I'm not saying who's right and who's wrong and who created all this. I'm just simply saying this is the fact of the matter. These are facts. We can't really argue with these things. This is what's happening, right? So if hospitals are incentivized to lie, right, what does that do to the statistics? Potentially it artificially inflates them, right? So we get artificial increase, and it inflates the statistics artificially. Now, who is relying on these statistics to make decisions about whether we open, shut, or when we open or when we close? Your governments. Most cases, it's the state governments that they're watching the news and they're looking at these numbers and these statistics. Now, if these statistics are artificially inflated, and the governments don't really adjust for that, then what ends up happening is they could be holding off on opening some places that don't need to be closed and closing some places that don't need to be closed, further bankrupting their economies, further increasing the death rate through suicide and through other means, through other scenarios. So again, if we have artificial statistics and we have governors that are basing their decisions because these statistics are artificial, and the reason they're artificial is because the leaders are saying, let's not really be scientific about how we're counting or how we're taking consideration about how COVID is diagnosed and who's dying from COVID or who's dying from other things. And because that's coming from the leaders, and the hospitals are getting paid, so they're getting a financial incentive to call it this, then again, we're going to get artificial inflation of the stats. And so again, if our governments are then taking artificially inflated stats, then everybody's going to get the potential for having either stay-at-home orders being longer than what they need to be, and potential bankruptcy for a number of families. Now, I know people who are struggling right now. I know many of you will say, and maybe let's poll you guys, how many of you know somebody who has died from COVID-19, like confirmed COVID-19, not secondary sequelae, not a heart attack that was called COVID-19, not something else, but actually died from COVID-19. I know they exist. I know there are people out there that have. I'm not saying that hasn't happened. It has. How many of you know somebody who has died from COVID-19? And then on the other side of that question is, how many of you know somebody who's this close to financial ruin and bankruptcy, who's blown through their financial savings and their potential life savings in a manner to keep their families fed right now? Because one of the things as a byproduct of all this, right, is your stock markets have crashed. Another fact, right? So if you were invested in the stock market with your 401k, for example, or with the money, and now you don't have a job and you don't have any means to support yourself, and you didn't get some of the government bailout money, because a lot of that money we know was now given to bigger corporations and not so much to small businesses, and you had a bunch of money in the stock market and you lost half the value of that money overnight, and you were relying on that money for your retirement, and now you have to take it out, what's left, you have to take it out to feed your family. How many of you are going to suffer from that? And how many of you know somebody in that situation? Because I do. I know people on both sides. I know people who have been hospitalized over COVID. I don't know anybody personally who's died, but I know people who've been hospitalized over it. And I know people who have lost their life savings. They've lost everything they've worked for in their entire life. And so we've got a scale here. We've got two sides of this. And so I know that if any of you have been, watching media and hanging out around some of the social media platforms, there's like two very polarized sides, and there's no clear critical thinking, really, in my opinion, by both of these sides. Is one side it's all conspiracy, and then there's the other side that no, everybody needs to stay at home and trust the government. Well, we already know the government. How trustworthy is it? In some cases, it's not trustworthy at all. And so I think there's a realm in the middle where we can come to an intelligent conclusion about what actually needs to happen. I think that realm, though, if we are not thinking about these things intelligently, and if you as a citizen, if you as a person are not in contact with your government, with your authorities, and questioning the very things that they're saying to you, and questioning why these things are happening versus just staying inside out of fear, I think that's a mistake. I think those of you who just stay inside out of fear and don't actually question, don't get educated, that's a mistake. And I think those of you who are running out and in public and starting mass scale riot. Well, there's nobody really starting riots. I think the people that are out in public, most of them are trying to do safe distancing, some are not. And so again, I think there's two sides to this. So where are you at? Because right now, if you want to maintain your health, which is what my show is all about, I don't like to get political. I don't like to get into governmental things. However, part of maintaining your health right now is how well we get through this crisis, right? And I've given you a lot of tips here in the last several months about vitamins, about minerals, about exercise and sunshine, and turning off the media because of the scares. But we're at a point now where if we don't take critical responsibility, get educated, empower ourselves to make better decisions, then we're going to end up with a bigger problem than a pandemic. We're going to end up with a nation that's potentially bankrupt, and a lot of people are going to die as a result of that outcome. So I don't want to see that happen to any of you. So I challenge everyone listening tonight to step up with your critical brain. It's what we have been teaching you here this entire time through Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain Show. What do I teach you? I don't just tell you take a vitamin or take a supplement. I teach you every week. I teach you how the vitamin works. I teach you what the symptoms, what the side effects, what the foods are. I teach you how to be a critical thinker around nutrition. Now I'm asking you to be a critical thinker about what's going on in the world, and you need to have your voice heard. You need to stand up and make sure that your voice is heard. Quit arguing with each other on social media and get a hold of your senator, get a hold of your representative, and make the power of your voice be heard. But do so with critical thinking, and don't do it out of fear. So all that being said, I'm going to go to the feed for answering questions tonight. Again, I wanted to share that with you. Probably half of you hate me now, but I don't really care. I think this is more important than the opinions of people who aren't critical thinkers. So let's dive into some of your questions as we go through it. And if you've got commentary on this, feel free to chime in. Okay, so we got a question coming in on what are my thoughts on nebulized hydrogen peroxide as a treatment for viruses? Melissa wants to know. I don't have an opinion, Melissa, because I've never used nebulized hydrogen peroxide as a treatment for viruses, so I'm not the expert. I don't have any great opinions on that particular type of treatment. Renee wants to know, I know NAC is a precursor to glutathione. However, why wouldn't a person intake glutathione straight into the mouth? It's because glutathione is a tripeptide and it's not very well absorbed by the GI tract. So taking glutathione, you're not going to get as effective of an effect as you will with NAC. NAC is fully absorbed and stimulates the production of your body to make glutathione. So NAC is just much more effective at elevating serum glutathione levels. Can a pregnant woman take high doses of vitamin C? Yes, a pregnant woman can take high doses of vitamin C. Remember, vitamin C, there are no known cases of toxicity of vitamin C, and the reason why is you'll have diarrhea before you ever hit a level of toxicity if you're taking it orally. Yeah, is it not a fact that most masks do not work? Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. You're right. Most masks don't work, this is just another inconsistency, which, makes me question, because originally the government said don't wear masks, right? So originally we were told nobody wear masks, save the masks as PPE for our hospital staff. And then now we're all being told we need to start wearing masks. It doesn't make any sense because most of the masks that you can buy over the counter are too, they're not going to do anything because the space in the mask, the virus just walks right through it. It's like an open door. So there's really not going to be any great protection that you're going to get from wearing these masks. Just not effective. And then there's the side effect of wearing the mask all day. I mean, the side effect of that is basically you're not going to adequately oxygenate your tissue. So when you're not getting adequate oxygenation, that's going to suppress your immune system. So the masks themselves don't make a whole lot of sense to go around wearing masks. This is, again, a lot of people just don't understand the viral particle itself is way too small. It's going to cruise right through that mask without any problems. Okay, let's see here. Are continuous glucose monitors, Freestyle Libre 14-day, helpful or harmful in this time of Corona? It depends, Angeline. Why would you want to use a continuous glucose monitor? I would say if you have a continuous glucose monitor because you're a type 1 diabetic and you're trying to control your diet really, really well and make sure that your sugars aren't going all over the place, might be a good idea. But if you're not a diabetic, I don't really know why a continuous glucose monitor is going to be a tremendous benefit if you pay attention to how your body feels. If you're type 2 diabetic, the best advice I can give you is eat phase 2 and no grain, no pain. If you don't know what that means, go pick up your copy of No Grain, No Pain and read phase 1 and phase 2 diets. Phase 2 diet is designed to help. It's designed to help control blood sugar. It's designed to help to stop autoimmune disease. And so, but it works extremely well for controlling blood sugar. So if you're worried about your blood sugars being a secondary or kind of increasing your risk for COVID complication, and that is one of the increased risks for COVID complication, then you really need to have your diet dialed in. Let's see, Mike wants to know, are beans okay in the No Grain, No Pain diet as long as they don't cause intestinal distress for people that can tolerate them? They are, provided that my advice would be to cook the beans very, very well, soak them and drain them a couple of times. That way you get rid of a lot of the different lectins and phytates and other compounds that are in the beans. That way when you eat them, they're less of a digestive distress for you. Is there a way to build the white blood cells that fight any infection? Yes, good, healthy nutrition, adequate sleep, sunshine, and stress control and stress management. It works like a charm. Is there a supplement to take that builds white blood cells? There are a lot that help, white blood cells. But, for example, vitamin C is a primary supplement that it helps to increase natural killer cells. There are a number of studies that show that. L-glutamine is the fuel source for your lymphocytes. So for your lymphocytes to have enough energy to function properly, they need L-glutamine. And this has also been shown in a number of research studies. So those are things that could be potentially helpful for immune support. Let's see here. How about nebulizing colloidal silver? Would not recommend that, Chris. would not recommend that at all. You don't want to nebulize colloidal silver, in my opinion. Butis wants to know, how should I take vitamin D and how regular? Well, vitamin D, if you go back, Butis, check out some of my earlier shows that I've done on vitamin D as it relates to the immune support for COVID. Because it's a pretty lengthy video. It's about 45 minutes long. There are different strategies with vitamin D, including kind of steady state high doses, but also kind of what's called a high dose therapy, which is a therapy that lasts about 3 days. Raza wants to know, what's the cure for alopecia universalis? Look, Raza, that's an autoimmune disease. So a good place to start is no grain, no pain. Diet has to come first. Everything else has to be customized to what your needs are. Lisa asks, where do I get news that I trust? It's a great question. So Lisa, there's a kind of an old saying that there's always two sides to every story, right? And so, just like there's two political parties, right? There's two sides to every story, and the truth usually lies somewhere in between. The truth is not usually the rhetoric that you hear being screamed from one of either sides. It's usually somewhere in between. So the best place to get news is to hear out both sides, but then to also seek with your own eyes and your own ears. I mean, truth is in front of us if we choose to see it, if we choose to look at it. I mean, a perfect example is, somebody asked a question about masks. And I said masks were most likely a waste of time. Now, aside from the fact that the masks generally are too porous for the virus, so the virus can come right in, and whether you're trying to prevent the viral spread or whether you're trying to protect yourself, either way, the mask is too porous. If masks were that critical, and COVID were that dangerous, this is what I mean by watching and looking with your eyes. Look what happens every time you see government officials on the podium. Do you see any of them wearing masks? Are they wearing masks when they're up there giving daily briefs? No, not at all. Do you see any of them distancing, social distancing? No. As a matter of fact, do you see that some of them touch their hands to their face? Yes. Hands to face, yes. So, there's something I can't stand, and that is do as I say, but not as I do, right? That type of mentality where somebody is, holier than thou art. They'll tell you what to do, but they won't actually apply it and do it themselves. It's kind of like a fat doctor. Let's just be honest. If you're going to a doctor and they're trying to teach you how to lose weight, but they have, 50 pounds of excess around their own waist, how much can you really trust that? They're telling you to do something, but they really don't know what they're talking about if they can't do it for themselves. It's the same thing with the government. The government, in large part, and again, I'm not political. I'm not saying I hate Trump. I'm not saying I love Trump. Please don't take anything political out of this. This is just true observation. If the government thinks that the disease is so dangerous, then why isn't every representative up there wearing a mask and social distancing and keeping their hands to themselves? And they're not. So you ask me where I get my information. A lot of it is through observation of what's happening and what's playing out in real time. And this is where, you have to, part of restoring your health, as I said earlier, is acquiring knowledge that gives you power to make meaningful change. Well, critical thinking is important, not just in your health and nutrition. It's critical in how you analyze the world. And we live in such a world today where everybody's been told that you're a racist if you think of something this way, or that you're prejudiced if you think of something this way, when the reality is all those things are nothing more than telling you not to have critical thinking. They're telling to block your ability to have critical thinking so that you don't fear being a racist or being called a name or being called some kind of category of something. And so everybody's scared to critically think. But the number one thing that you can do right now is critically think, because most people right now are not critically thinking. What are they doing? Most people right now are either fear-mongering, or they're deciding from fear. And when you decide things, when you make important decisions from fear, you're using your limbic brain and you don't make good decisions. People generally, when they're super highly emotionally charged, make some of the worst decisions in their life. And that's what's happening right now, is you've got people that are highly emotionally charged on both sides The truth is always somewhere in between, but you have to be able to use your eyes and your ears, and you have to think about what you're actually seeing. You have to look at what people are saying, and then you have to think about what you're actually seeing. And again, that's where you're going to find the truth. So, okay, hopefully that answers your question. That's a big one. Chucho says, what's the rhetoric about you cannot catch a virus? That's too big of a topic for this. I can lead you down a rabbit hole, Chucho, if you look up, if you want to look at a rabbit hole on that. It's called New German Medicine. And there's a lot of very accurate components to New German Medicine. Do I think New German Medicine is actually 100% accurate? No, but I think there's a lot of truth to what some of those scientists are saying. Let's see here. Opinion on zinc. Zinc is great. I've done several shows in the last month on zinc. If you haven't seen those, go back to our COVID research and support page, which you can go to glutenfreesociety.org/viral outbreak. And you can see we've got about 8 hours of video. Several of those are on zinc and if you're going to take zinc, how much to take and how to get your zinc absorbed more effectively and more efficiently. So Lisa wants to know, I make cheeses and kefir soaking the beans in whey seem to diminish my problems with gas. Well, if you're fermenting them, you remember when you ferment it, you're letting bacteria pre-digest the food. So it diminishes your gas because it improves your ability to digest something because in essence, it's pre-digested. Okay. Pam says, I'm dealing with chronic fatigue syndrome. Are you saying no grain, no pain is the start for everyone? I'm saying it's a good place to start if you're generalizing, Pam. Remember that a big part of what I teach is analytical, critical thinking, paying attention to how your body feels, paying attention to how your body responds. But no grain, no pain is a good platform for a person to begin. And then once you begin with that platform, in my opinion, next level is if that doesn't resolve your CFS, then now you need to get with a good functional medicine or nutritional provider who understands biochemistry really quite well, who can help guide you through objective testing measures to help you define how you should eat a little bit more accurately for you as a unique individual. Donna says autoimmune disease is a big killer. 46 million people in the U.S. It's the #1 cause of death in females under the age of 65. Autoimmune disease is a far greater threat, in my opinion, than COVID-19. And again, going back to why I'm doing this show tonight, is I believe that the stress of the broken economy is going to lead to a lot of regression in people's autoimmune disease, because one of the triggers for autoimmune disease is stress. Vicky wants to know, my son's SOD pathway is blocked. I'd like to know how you know that his SOD stands for superoxide dismutase, for those of you who don't know. Was it tested? Did he actually have testing that measured, or is this a suspicion that you have? SOD has 3 primary coenzymes that is necessary to activate it, and that's zinc, manganese, and copper. And so making sure, I would say, Vicky, get your son's zinc, manganese, and copper levels measured to make sure that they're adequate to drive superoxide dismutase appropriately, because it's a very potent antioxidant enzyme that's super important for overall health. Dave says, I've heard Dr. Fauci has been taking 2 grams of vitamin C for years. Why has he not advised people through the media to do the same? I don't know. And I can't confirm nor deny that he's been or not been taking vitamin C. But if he is, why is he not advising people to do it? Well, I would say this, and just those of you who aren't in the health arena, maybe some of you listening tonight are, but those of you who are not, you should be aware. One of the things that's happening, again, part of what's happened is that the FDA is sending out letters of threat. For anyone making claims that vitamins, minerals, or any type of over-the-counter remedy would be effective against COVID-19. They're taking the stance that because COVID-19 is a novel virus, meaning it's new and we don't know anything about it, that if you're hawking your wares, so to speak, and telling people to take more vitamin C to cure COVID-19, then they're gonna persecute you. And so that's part of it, is the government is actually suppressing people who are just trying to inform. I know we were censored. I was, again, I was written up in the New York Post. I was written up in Business Insider. We were censored by YouTube without recourse. They didn't give us a reason. Everything that New York Post wrote about what I said was actually a lie and false. So we know there's that's happening, and we know that there's this that's happening. Why? Is there an underlying agenda? I don't know. I can't say for certain, but it feels wrong and it feels off. And so intuitively, I have a thought about it. I have the thought that the answer in a big part of this whole mess is that many people are becoming very, very wealthy as a result of a lot of what's happening right now. And the vast majority of hardworking people like yourselves are experiencing severe financial hardship. Now, whether that's by design or whether that's by let's just say opportunists, I don't know. I don't think anyone really does. But does it matter if it's ill will and ill intent towards you? I would say, are you going to let the FDA decide and choose whether you think taking vitamin C right now is a good or a bad move? No, nobody is. They're going to make that decision based on how they feel about vitamin C. So the best thing that we can do is get educated about its 80-year clinical history and being able to fight viruses. Same thing with zinc. Let's see here. Is kombucha and fermented foods good to drink and eat? This show is such a dichotomy tonight because we're talking about, anyway, is kombucha and fermented foods good to drink and eat? Kombucha, I don't recommend. Kombucha is just sugar alcohol. It's garbage. I don't recommend it. As far as other fermented foods, if they're salt ferments like sauerkraut or fermented broccoli or cauliflower or pickles or something like that, those are fine. Let's see here. Lisa says, may not be a health question, but should we be thinking about growing our own food and becoming more self-sustaining people? I love that question, and it is a health question. It is right on cue, and thank you for asking it. Let's talk about that for just a minute. If you haven't already started your own garden, you're late to the game. If you have, kudos to you. If you haven't, just because you're late to the game doesn't mean you shouldn't get in the game. Let's take a look at what we know. We know that in order to feed the 300 plus million people in the United States, farms have had to definitely change with time. Meaning, what's happened in farming is that it's less mom and pops, meaning less small farms and more corporate farms. So big corporations. These corporations have an advantage in this sense that, number one, they have more capital, they have more land, and they have it really figured out on how to get the government subsidies, because you have to understand the government subsidizes a lot of the farming so that farmers don't go out of business. That was originally done after the Great Depression to help mom and pop farmers not go out of business so we had enough food to eat. But what's happened with time is that farms have become business models, so they become more corporation. And so with any corporation, you have something called scale of business. So what happens is any corporation, they want to scale up their production to increase their profits. And so sometimes when it comes to corporations, and it's not a mom and pop, so mom and pops tend to make ethical and moral decisions, okay, because they have a conscience. Corporations tend to make less ethical decisions, and they tend to make decisions based more on increase of profit because it's a business. And so you'll see that no matter what business you're in, whether it's the healthcare industry or whether it's farming or whether it's, local shops, it's kind of all that way. When you can scale the business as a corporation, you can increase your profits, but you think less about the ethical complications or the moral complications that might occur as you're making the decision to increase your profit based on scalability. And one of the things that's happened in farming is the use of a chemical compound called Roundup and Roundup Ready seeds. And so what's happened is these patented corporations, so guess who owns this? This is owned by drug companies. So big drug and big agri, which are kind of the same beast, own this stuff right here. And so they've made their way into our food supply, and the farming has gone corporate because farmers couldn't survive on a mom and pop when this was introduced. And so these big corporations pushed a lot of mom and pop farmers out of business. So now what you're left with is corporate farming making decisions. And so the food that they're growing isn't good for you. And there's several reasons. I call it fruit. It's not really food. It's fruit. It's fake food, right? Frankenfood. And why is it Frankenfood? Because what ends up happening is, first of all, the pesticide exposure, the same pesticides they're putting in and spraying on your food 2-3 times before it's harvested, they're wearing full chem gear to apply it, which means it's toxic, which means it's dangerous. And the research tends to show that. So, you know, here you are, you're just trying to do your best in the world. You're not thinking, okay, you're thinking that, you know, to pay $6 for a crate of organic strawberries is ridiculous when you can get a non-organic variety for $1.50. And you're just trying to make your ends meet. You're just trying to keep your family fed and do what you can do, right? Well, if you didn't know this, and this is part of analytical thinking and getting empowered, is that now you know those big corporate farms produce a lot of fruit. The soil that they're using has been overutilized, so the nutrient density of the soil is vastly diminished, and that's why when we do analytical studies, chemical analytical studies on produce, we see that produce produced today is less nutrient dense than it was produced 20, 30, 40 years ago. So we have less vitamins and minerals in the food that we eat. Some of the food we eat isn't even real food. A lot of it is corporations, then big corp. So again, big corporations then will take that fruit and they will package it in a manner that's consistent with looking healthy. So they'll put, you know, the package, they'll put green labels on it, and they'll talk about how it's all natural, and they'll use what we call in the marketing industry window dressing. They'll say all these wonderful things about it that the average person who doesn't know the difference between all natural, because all natural has no real definitive meaning, right? They're buying this garbage and they think they're doing something healthy to themselves. And so they don't even really realize, because they don't have the knowledge, they don't even really realize that what they're actually eating is killing themselves and killing their families. And they're just trying to make ends meet. And so you've got the farms creating the food, and then you got other companies that are buying that food and packaging it as if it's healthy and then feeding it right back to you. And some of these same companies are also owned by this big agri-drug companies. And then when you get sick from eating this garbage, this swill, right, now the drug companies come in and say, we have the solution, take the drug. So to answer your question, should you be growing your own food? And again, this is a very, very brief overview of this whole process, but the answer is yes. You should start a garden. Yes. If you don't have land, you should instead of worrying about flowers and plants, maybe plant a smaller garden where you can grow some of your food. You know, again, not everybody has, you know, an acre to put a huge farm on, but take some self-control and self-responsibility. The other thing you can do is buy local. You can join a local co-op where there's a community of people that are producing organic produce, and they come together and they sell it at a lower cost. So you can get involved with local co-ops to get organic food. So there's a lot of real ways that you don't have to necessarily grow your own garden to get food. However, when the proverbial, you know what, hits the fan and we have the potential for food shortages, if you don't have the ability to grow your own food, or if you haven't, you know, canned enough food, or you don't have enough canned food on hand to get you through a potential time where food shortage could be a very real issue, then this is what I mean by you're late to the game. Right now isn't the time. This should have started already. What you can do now, though, is begin it, start learning about it, because at the end of the day, it's your responsibility to make sure that what you're eating is real and not fruit, and that means educating yourself about how to do it and take more responsibility about where your food comes from. I mean, we're all guilty of that to a certain extent. So I'm not pointing fingers at necessarily anyone in particular. I'm just simply saying we've all let big corporations gain our trust and sell us things that aren't good for us. And it's time to take our power back. And it's time to, in a sense, have a social revolution of the way we think about food and where food comes from. Because if we don't, 46 million autoimmune deaths this year is going to double in the next 10 years, and we're going to have a much, much bigger problem on our hand. Okay. Long-term complications recovering from COVID, Myriad wants to know. Nobody knows, Miriam, because it hasn't been around long enough. I would say what we would suspect to be long-term complications would be potentially lung issues. If COVID impact is in the lungs, then the lung issue itself, the potential for the inflammation in the lungs. And this is where several days ago, or several weeks ago, I'd mentioned nebulizing glutathione or not. I'd mentioned asking your doctor about getting a prescription for nebulizing glutathione as part of one of those potential complications. Okay. Let's see. We got a lot of Lisas tonight. Another Lisa. Husband has liver disease and cholesterol is low on phase 2 of no grain, no pain. How can he increase his cholesterol? Well, maybe he doesn't necessarily need to increase it. I'd need more answers. Or I need to have more questions to ask of him about his history before I could really give any kind of meaningful tips. But if we're just talking about dietary wise, remember cholesterol, 75% of cholesterol is produced as a result of the liver, and 25% of it is dietary. So, I mean, yes, you can get more cholesterol through your diet, and that is one thing you could do more, is eat more cholesterol. But if he's got liver disease, there may be some other underlying cofactors nutritionally that need to be addressed first. And that's a really hard question to answer with just generic information. Let's see. Dwayne wants to know, what are my thoughts about the 5G network, which is supposedly operating unlicensed without the FCC. Therefore, companies are using it and the side effects are making people sick. I believe that's true. I believe that 5G is going to make a lot of people sick, Dwayne. And this goes back to, I sent out an email. Those of you who aren't on my email list, you should be. If you want to stay informed and educated and become empowered, you need to go over to glutenfreesociety.org and sign up for my newsletter so that you can, receive information from me on a regular basis. I just sent out an email today about a major summit event where there are about 40 different experts on biology and energetics and physics and the hard sciences that are going to be talking about the implications of 5G on human health. And if you don't receive my emails, go subscribe so that you can get that, because I would encourage you to watch that event. So, I mean, there are theories out there that people are saying, hey, the 5G is the cause of COVID. And I don't think we can say that, because there are places where COVID exists, where COVID's rampant, where there are no 5G towers. So I don't think you can say that. You can't blame, you can't really blame COVID on 5G. Are there some overlaps? Potentially, yes, possibly so. Can 5G affect the lungs? Yes, it can. But again, I don't think we can make the 100% overlap there. Margie says, would you trust organic berries from the USA from the same farm that sells the exact same berries in non-organic farm? I would trust them less, Margie. And this is why I grow my own berries. I've got several berry bushes as part of my home farm. And yeah, I mean, I would trust more organic berries from a local co-op than I would from a mass production farm. Okay. My husband, let's see. My husband needs to take 2 tests. Would you recommend him waiting to go to the labs to prevent from being exposed to the coronavirus? I would say that that's largely dependent upon, well, I don't even want to get into that question. If he's a client in the office, call the office and we'll give you better guidance. Let's see here. Bridget says, I found out my aircon is full of black mold. I stopped using it. My sinuses and airway have been really sore since. It's been summer here in Australia, and the aircon was on daily, and I'm afraid I have mold in them. What is the best way to treat mold in the sinus? The best way is to identify it first. Ask your doctor to culture your deep sinuses. They can do a culture and analyze it for mold. If it was in your air conditioning unit, you might actually have somebody come out and test to see what kind of mold was in your AC unit, because if you suspect you've got mold in your sinus from your AC unit, that might be another way to absolutely figure it out. Back that up just a little. Okay, so where does the date show that we can be carriers of the virus? Not sure I understand that question. Marianne, maybe re-ask it. I'm not sure I understand what your question is. Let's see. Yeah, I like that idea. Laura says, here in Spain, thanks for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. What about publishing No Grain, No Pain in Spanish? We're after the publisher. We've told them, we've sent them numerous, we get requests daily from around the globe, especially from Spain and from Mexico and other Spanish-speaking countries, about getting No Grain, No Pain published in Spanish. So keep writing in, and we'll keep sending those on to our publisher, and hopefully they'll do something about it. Yeah, let's see here. What do you recommend to get dry nuts and fruits from? I recommend, if you're buying nuts, if you're following a grain-free diet, buy them in the shell. Ideally, buy them in the shell, because in the shell you have less risk for potential cross-contamination. And generally speaking, the shell, if they're not organic, it's definitely going to be reduced, because those hard shells are not going to allow for that penetrance so much. And a lot of the bigger trees, the nut trees, are not, they don't spray them super heavily. I have pecan trees, and you don't really, there's no need to spray them. There's no need to protect them so much as like other types of crops. But yeah, if you're looking for nuts, buy them in the shell, and look for organic in the shell to avoid that gluten cross-contamination. Let's see here. Will boosting your lymphatic system help in this time? And if so, how do you recommend to do so? There's no boosting your lymphatic system, Tinker. The thing is, the lymphatic system is, think of it as a system of vessels that run through the body, and they carry your white blood cells to different areas, to your lymph nodes, to concentrate in different areas. So like, as an example, your tonsils, if you still have them, are part of your lymphatic system, and they swell when you get an infection or when you have an issue. They swell with white blood cells, because those white blood cells are there to protect you. So how do you boost that lymphatic system? How do you make it work? You've got to make sure it stays circulating really, really well. So one of the best things you can do is stretch and move your body, because unlike your bloodstream has the heart to pump it, your lymphatic system has movement and motion and activity to pump it. So some people get on rebounders, like little rebounding trampolines. It's a great way to move your lymphatics, but you don't need necessarily even a rebounder. You can run in place, jog in place, do burpees. There are a lot of different motions and exercises and calisthenics, jump ropes, jumping jacks that you can do that's going to circulate your lymphatic fluid really well. Sitting on your keister all day long is one of the worst things you can do for your lymphatic system. Let's see, since I have fibro, do I have to worry about corona? Karen, I'd say everybody needs to be concerned about corona, but because you have fibro, I'd say, is fibromyalgia an immunosuppressant issue? Not so much. It depends on how many medications you're taking for the fibro pain. That's when you're really going to run into the secondary complications of increased risk. Again, depending on the class of medicines that you might be using as a treatment option. Keep going down. Let's see. So somebody said aspirin and pain meds aren't a good example, because you shouldn't compare them head to head. And I will argue that. I will say they are contagious, and here's why. They're contagious because they're dispensed without thought. And so how many hundreds of thousands of doctors do you have that recommend this class of medication without thinking about the potential for the damaging side effects. You do have a contagion. It's just not a person-to-person contagion the way we think of a viral disease or a viral spread. It's a government-sanctioned, physician-sanctioned spread without thinking about it. So in my opinion, that's actually even more dangerous. And it is a good comparative. Let's see here. What about herd immunity? Would this decrease the spread? So the question about herd immunity, so understand what herd immunity really means. Herd immunity means enough people in the herd, enough humans in the herd of humans, right, have been exposed to the virus and recovered from it, that there's a circulating level of antibodies within the herd that offers a vast level of protection against it. The problem with the concept of herd immunity as it relates to coronavirus, and where the flaw in the thought process is this: we have influenza, right? And every year people go down with influenza A, influenza B, and other types of viral infections, even though we technically have people that are being vaccinated on a yearly basis. So the whole theory as it relates to viruses and herd immunity, really, in my opinion, it doesn't make any sense. If everybody sits around waiting for a vaccine for this, look, we've got a vaccine for influenza, and has that vaccine eradicated influenza? It absolutely hasn't. And some actually argue that the toxins in the vaccine actually do more damage to the immune system than what it's worth getting. And some also argue that getting the vaccine itself, especially in the attenuated version, actually creates a spreading of the virus. But then there's the other component, which is mutation. Viruses are known to mutate, and so, you might have, this is the whole thing. You might have immunity to this year's strain, but what about next year's strain? That's why those of you who are pent up in your house, waiting for the vaccine to come out before you take part in society again, you're not critically thinking this through, and you really need to critically think this through. Don't wait for a vaccine. Your immune system creates the most powerful vaccines in the world. You need to take care of your body and take care of yourself. Come out of that fear mode, and know that that your body's gonna do what it needs to do to help you. But herd immunity, the whole logic behind herd immunity in this virus is a moot point, because viruses mutate too quickly for herd immunity. And again, this is again, if remember what I said. You're hearing the government say we need to wait. Nobody needs to go out until we have a vaccine. Yet we have a vaccine for influenza, and influenza still runs rampant, and still, even this year, has killed more people than COVID. So if the vaccines for influenza haven't worked, then why would we anticipate that the vaccines for COVID and even vaccines that are going to be rushed through without proper research and safety trials, with adequate length of safety studies and trials, why would we suspect that that's going to somehow be our miracle savior? Your miracle savior is you. If you want something to save you, go home right now, look in the mirror, okay, and start thinking critically about the decisions that you're currently making and whether those are working toward improving your health or diluting your health. Yeah, so another Lisa says, recently read an article about Aspergillus mold causing increased risk of death in COVID patients. Yes, it can be true, because Aspergillus can actually grow in the lung tissue and can create a heck of a problem for people. So it is one of those things that if you're exposed to Aspergillus, it increases your risk. You are one that is at greater risk. Karen, do you agree about taking vitamin C, D, and zinc? I do, Karen. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go to our Corona resource page and you can watch some of those videos where I've talked about that in really great depth. Let's see here. So, yeah, I mean, that's another point. So Raza says that a lot of people are mistaking corona as allergy symptoms. I did a whole video on that topic too, on corona versus allergy symptoms. So those of you who have traditional spring allergies might want to go watch that video and give yourself some differentiation. Okay. Keep going. Patty, that's another can of worms you just opened up. So Patty says, how do we know if the vaccine coming out has the RFID chip? Good question. That's another thing. To me, when you pass your self-responsibility, like when I said go look in the mirror, I really meant that for a lot of different reasons. Number one, go look in the mirror because you are the only person responsible for yourself. And unless you're a child, you are the only person responsible for yourself. And if you give over your power, if you choose to ignore knowledge and give your power to somebody else, whether it's that somebody else is a vaccine or somebody pushing or pimping out a vaccine or pimping out a drug, you understand what you're doing is you're giving your power to that, and you're putting your hope into something like that instead of putting the power in the hands of where it belongs. You have the power. Your body has the power. You need to harness it. You know, one of my favorite quotes is from an old football coach. For those of you who are old enough to remember the Houston Oilers football team here in Houston before the Texans, his name was Bum Phillips, and what he used to say is, potential means you ain't done it yet. And what does that mean? That means your body has the potential to heal and repair itself and to protect itself. The potential, mind you. But the potential, right, where you don't access the potential through choice, because that's where your potential comes from. Your potential comes from intelligent choices over time. And then you have the potential to achieve great things in your health and in life as a general rule. And so if you're not ever tapping into that and you're trading your power and your potential over to something else that is passive, meaning you're saying, I'm not willing to do the work, I'm just going to trust that this thing that I'm going to put in my body is going to do the work for me. Has that ever worked in the history of man? Can you think of one pill, potion, elixir, or anything that has ever worked to the level that has profoundly impacted the world? I can think of really only one example where we've taken a passive drug and it actually saved lives the way it was intended to, and that's with the use of antibiotics for true infections. But beyond that, pretty much every other drug is not solving the issue. It's masking the symptom, and it's not the same thing. Suppressing the symptom so that you feel better is lying to yourself so that you can keep having bad behaviors ultimately. And so again, going back to knowledge is power, you know, understand that when you agree to take that passive therapy, that passive drug, that thing the symptom, to treat the symptom that you have that wouldn't even be there if you activated these two things first, then I feel sorry for you, because you're going to be a victim for the rest of your life. I mean, that's just the truth of the matter. If you don't take the time to learn about the most important asset that you'll ever own, which is you, you know, there's nothing anybody can do to help you, and there's nothing any shot or pill or potion or vaccine is going to do to help you either. Okay, I think we're out of time. Questions keep rolling in, but we'll catch them next week. Look, I want to say thank you to all of you who stayed with me tonight and didn't attack me viciously, because again, this is a pretty polarized subject, but I wanted to give you something to go home and think about. I wanted to give you the ability to start looking at this critically and help you feel empowered that you have the ability, all of you watching tonight have the ability to question what the authority is saying. You all have the ability to change, and you all have the ability to take control of this situation in a manner that best suits you and your freedom. So I would encourage you all to think about that before you so willingly give up your power, and trust that the knowledge that's being fed to you is 100% accurate. Read between the lines, analyze both sides. Both sides are right and both sides are wrong, and we can all work together to come to some type of place where this outcome is going to be hopefully best for everyone's health. So wishing you an excellent week. We'll see you next Monday for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Hey, don't forget to tune in next week, same time, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, for another Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain show. Bring all your toughest health questions to me. I look forward to answering them. And before you leave today, make sure you hit subscribe. And once you do, click that bell. That bell is going to allow us to remind you right before we go live, but it's also going to allow us to remind you when we come out with other video content all week long. We've got lots of episodes coming your way all week long, and I don't want you to miss anything. So again, subscribe, hit that bell so that you can get notified when we have that new information.